Joining us now, my friend, I'm delighted he's with us, Senator Rand Paul from the great state of Kentucky. He joins us now. Senator Paul, great to talk to you. How you doing?
Very good, Laura. Thanks for having me.
So give me your take on where we are here. I was going back and watching some of the old videos from 2013 and how, again, President Obama was standing firm and he was holding the line, and these Republicans were the ones at fault. But now we got Democrats apparently willing to shut down the government to give clean amnesty to illegal immigrants, and it's Trump's fault.
Well, it's a bit naive for Democrats to think when they control no branches of government, they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate, they don't control the presidency, they're going to get everything they want. So really, this would have to be a negotiation. I think the president holds the cards, and if he stands firm, he'll get a decent negotiation on this. And I think there is actually a compromise to be had. I think there's a compromise to be had. What I would do is I just wouldn't add to immigration. We admit about 1 million people a year. If you want to admit these DACA kids, admit them, but subtract them from the totals that we admit every year and do not increase immigration. Fix diversity lottery for everyone. Fix chain migration for everyone. And do border security, including wall. And I think there is a deal to be had, but it's not a deal where you go to the Gang of Six, which is the same as the Gang of Eight. These are the moderate Republicans, and they think they represent everyone. What's naive about them is they don't represent all the conservative Republicans in the House. So anything the Gang of Six thinks they want to pass, working with Dick Durbin and those guys, it has no validity that it will pass in the House.
No, and I think, again, you've been making this point, which I think is brilliant. And you know me, I don't suck up to you, Senator, but I've liked your argument all along on this. And I think that's where this is going to end up. That's what I tend to believe. But who knows? The Democrats may be willing to shut it down to drive some type of narrative that Trump is anti-Hispanic. They might want to do that. I think it's really stupid, but they might be going there. I don't know.
About 6 months ago, I went to the Democrats that were promoting the Dreamer Act, and I said, maybe there's a compromise here where you don't get everything you want, but they get to stay as long as we subtract them from the normal totals of immigration. And they came back to me and said, no way, we want everything. We want what we want. And this has been the battle of immigration for years up here now. The people who say, oh, immigration is because Republicans blocked it, nothing ever changes immigration, because there are some things that are good that we could change, getting rid of diversity, lottery, chain migration, et cetera. None of that ever happens because Democrats want what they want, and they're unwilling to compromise. It's really been Democrats want everything. They want comprehensive. They want everything they want, and they've never been willing to compromise with the other side.
Mark Short, domestic policy at the White House yesterday, said, we feel like there's still a deal to be made here. Things we are asking for are common sense. And again, they're not closing the door. They're keeping the door open at the White House. But I think even Congressman Diaz-Balart, who is certainly more in line with Lindsey Graham than I am on immigration, and I think he would probably be more on Graham's side substantively. Even he came out in this Washington Post piece, Senator Paul, and said, coming out of that meeting and leaking something the president said behind closed doors was a toxic move. That was a move that hurt the process.
When you realize you have all these higher than, holier than thou, mightier moralizers coming out, and when you look back at Lindsey Graham's comments in 2013, he said exactly, if the president did say this, he said that we can't have all these folks coming from these hellhole countries. There have to be limits. And I'm not saying that's a good way of putting it for Lindsey Graham or the president, but when he said it, nobody was calling him a racist, and now he's a great statesman that everybody's looking towards for talking to President Trump and telling President Trump he was wrong. But in reality, there is a valid point. More people want to come from economically distressed countries than non-economically distressed countries. And so there do have to be the recognition that if everyone could come, there was a survey done a couple years ago and said if everybody who wanted to come could come to the U.S., 700 million people would come next year. And so we can't have all of them coming. So obviously we do need to be aware that more of them want to come from economically distressed areas. If the debate had been in those terms, we never would have gotten into all this other stuff. But we are where we are. The left is making it worse by continuing, the left-wing networks, the left-wing politicians, by continuing just to make this all about calling the the president names.
And now the hashtag is no DACA, no deal. So that is what is trending on the left right now, and MSNBC this morning picked up on it. I think if I had to guess right now, I'd say they're going to push this to the very last second, and maybe they're just doing it for political reasons. I'm not really sure, but it seems like they think they have an electoral victory here.
There's an irony here in that they blame the president and say he's some kind of hater. So I brought up that the president helped finance my medical mission trip to Haiti and to Central America. And you know what they're saying now? They're all calling me a racist. They're all saying they wish, if you look at my Twitter feed, every other Twitter response from a leftist is wishing me violence and I was injured recently. They're wishing that I would be re-injured again. And it's like, really? These are the people calling Trump a hater, and yet they're so filled and consumed with hate that they want violence to be meted out on our public officials, and everybody that disagrees with them they call a racist. It's a terrible situation, but coming from the extreme left. The extreme left doesn't want dialogue. They're the ones destroying any kind of civil atmosphere here.
Well, and it's a shame because on Martin Luther King Day yesterday, we ended up having on our show on Fox, on the Ingram Angle, we had really interesting conversations about the full life of King and how as a preacher, the core of King was the Bible. That's where he always was. It was always coming from the Bible, and it was a love of God, sacrifice for your fellow man, love over hate, and the left has turned King into a completely secular progressive, so much so that CNN tweeted out that he was socialist before it was cool, and he was an environmentalist before it was cool. And so tagging MLK with all of these reflexive left-wing issues. Of course, he was pro-life, as was his father, and it was before Roe versus Wade, but the sanctity of life, the idea that Dr. King, they can immediately say Dr. King would be for Roe versus Wade. I mean, it's a Rorschach test, apparently.
Yeah. And, you read a letter from a Birmingham jail, and there's a very philosophic discussion of, what is a just law. And one of my favorite quotes from that is that an unjust law is any law that is promulgated on a minority but not made binding on the majority. In other words, a law that does not equally apply to everyone is the very definition of an unjust law. And that's what segregation and all these legalized things that happened in the Jim Crow South were. Is they violated the fundamental principle that a law should apply to everyone equally. And that's an incredible precept. It's simple, but an incredible thing to base a society on, that laws apply. And really, our country was one of the first ever to do that. In previous iterations, you had countries that had royal, you had nobility. People always were above the law. And we were the first country, not perfect in the beginning, but after the Civil War, getting closer to the fact that everybody would be treated equally under the law.
We're talking to Rand Paul here on the Laura Ingraham Show. And Senator Paul, there are now 4 or 5 members of Congress who have said they are not coming to the President's State of the Union. Frederica Wilson of the Rhinestone Cowboy hat fame. Of course, Maxine Waters, John Lewis. What of that?
I've been surprised because throughout 8 years of President Obama, I was there for 6 of those. I went to the White House Christmas party when he was there. I went to this year at the White House Christmas party. There were like 3 Democrats there. In fact, it was kind of a nice party because they didn't come because there was a lot more room and space for everyone. But it was kind of disappointing in the sense that most Republicans did go when President Obama was in the office because the White House really belongs to the people, not to one particular president. And same with the State of the Union. I don't quite get it, but the vitriol has become so crazy. But even though I disagreed with President Obama, I sat down with him to talk about criminal justice reforms and things like that. I called him on the phone. I rode on Air Force One with him. And, I disagreed with him probably 95% of the time, but tried to work with him on the 5% that we did agree with in a civil way.
If you had to give President Trump some advice here, and I know you're probably loath to do that, but just where we are now with the toxicity of the conversation, and the left is clearly just using any opportunity to brand him as a hater or a racist or what have you. How would you advise that he make progress here, if that's possible?
I think on policy, the first year was just an incredible success. Justice Gorsuch was a great success. Getting rid of 15 regulations, great success. Big tax cut, great success. A lot of good things happened. But I would say that intemperate language doesn't help. And so I think we could do even better. We'd be less distracted if we had less of the daily dialogue. And I know that's what he's famous for, and he likes talking directly to the people. But I think if there was less ammunition, we'd get less distracted from the good things that he has done and that we've all been part of.
Well, and I think I would agree with you on that. I think, however, regardless of what he said behind closed doors, I mean, he could have served them tea and crumpets and given them commemorative, White House cufflinks and said, "Look, I can't do this deal." And there would have been something that they took out of that meeting that they would amplify and claim was an insult to the Dreamers or an insult to, to the people. If not his comment about S-hole, there would have been something else. Because, even when the president remember when he went to that, church in Detroit and had those amazing moments, the media almost didn't cover it at all. If I didn't run on it on my own digital recorder, I would have never seen it.
Yeah, and look at the whole Russia thing. You have whole networks that go crazy on this thing. They're still going all on collusion. And really the only evidence we have of collusion right now, the only evidence we have of somebody in Russia being paid for information during the campaign was Hillary Clinton's Oppo research with Chris Steele paying Russian agents for fake dossier information that they stuck in that dossier. That's the only proof we have of actual collusion with Russian agents of the government was Hillary Clinton's campaign paying the Russians, and yet all we still talk about, and that's what I keep asking the left-wing commentators is, well, if y'all want to keep this Mueller investigation going on, I guess we need to investigate the only evidence we have of collusion so far, which is Hillary Clinton paying a British spy to buy information from Russian agents.
Well, I appreciate your logic and common sense on this immigration issue. Senator Paul, you've never been one to be pulled in one way or another on these issues, and I think results ultimately will have a huge effect on the way people think and feel about these issues, regardless of the bloviators out there. And come on TV soon. Give my best to all your staff. Senator Rand Paul here on the Laura Ingraham Show.
We will make America great again.